Hi there, and welcome to today's class. For this class, we look at the study of chemical equation. Very first thing here is that we look at the study of chemical equations, um, chemical reaction, and how to possibly balance a chemical equation. So basically, the reason why I want to through this topic is to teach you guys how to correctly balance a chemical equation, right? So by the way, before now we have established that we represent elements using symbol, we represent compound using formula, and we represent chemical reaction using chemical equation. Let me prove that to you. How do you possibly represent chemical reaction using chemical equation, please? Let's define something, please. Let's define chemical reaction. Let's define chemical reaction. All right. First is first. Before I start with chemical equation, let's treat chemical reaction first. What is chemical reaction by definition? A chemical reaction is simply the combination of an element and a compound, or two elements or two compounds combined together to form a newer compound known as the product. So when two elements combine, or two compound, or an element and a compound combining to form several compounds known as a product, is said to be a chemical reaction. Put down please. Usually for a chemical reaction, usually for a chemical reaction, write this down please. Write this down. Usually for a chemical reaction, I have this piece. How do you possibly read this? Let's say I want to write boy or boys. Boy or boys. This is now outdated. What's the recent form of writing this? I can write this in this form. Either I say boy or boys. So this one here is read boy or boys. So don't write boy or boys in this way. It's outdated. This is the recent one they're using now. So it means that how do you possibly read this one? This what? Reactant. This reactant or reactants chemically combine together to give product or several products. So at this point here, put CR, that is chemical reaction. So this reactant undergoing a chemical reaction to give a product. Now listen up. The key thing to note under chemical reaction is that an element can combine to form a compound, or an element and a compound combine to form several compounds, or a compound and a compound combine to form several higher compounds. That becomes your tax under chemical reaction. All right, at this point now, after understanding the concept of chemical reaction, note that the two elements or element compound or compound that combine are called the reactant, while the results are said to be what? The product. I will explain what I just said using an example under chemical equation. All right, I understand the concept behind chemical reaction and its explanation, how it works. Let's look at yet the concept of chemical equation. Let's define chemical equation. All right, let's define chemical equation. A chemical equation is simply the symbolic representation of chemical reaction. So at this level, note that we represent element using symbol, that is, we represent element using symbols. We represent compound compound using formula represent chemical reaction using what they're using chemical equation. So at this level now, note that to represent element using symbol, compound using formula, chemical reaction using chemical equation. This is like a very important concept you need to note when it comes to chemical equation. So now listen up. I have from chemical equation, I have defined chemical reaction, chemical equation, right? Now, what are the kinds of example of chemical equation? I'll give you several examples under chemical equation to further increase the solid knowledge or solid understanding of reactants and products. At this point now, let's take several examples of a chemical equation. Example of chemical equation. Number one, let's say I have sodium combining with chlorine to give sodium chloride. In this case here, it becomes an element, right? Sodium is an element, chlorine is an element. These two elements are combining to give what there? A compound. So in this case now, these two elements that are combining are called the reactant. Why this one here is called what there? The product. So note please. Very important to note. So note that these two elements that are combining are called the reactant. Why this one here, the result is called what there is called the product. So note this example one. Let me give you example two. Let's say I have NaOH combining with HCl per se, HCl to give NaCl plus H2O. Observe this compound, please. This is an example of a compound and compound combined together to form several higher compounds, right? This is what an example of what a chemical equation. So note that these two that are combined are called the reactant. Why this result is said to be what there? This is said to be what? Product. A very important concept to note that the two compounds that are combined are said to be the reactant, while the result is said to be what there? The product. All right. I understand this example under chemical reaction. Note that when it comes to chemical reaction, we can represent the state of matter of each element. So when it comes to chemical reaction or perhaps chemical equation, we can represent the state of matter via subscript, right? So what do I mean? So I'm saying that for chemical equation, you can represent their state of matter via subscript, right? What do I mean? Look at this compound now. These two reactants and the product, I can represent them by their state of matter using subscript. What do I mean? Look up. For this compound here, I have NaOH. This, of course, a liquid combined with HCl, still what there? A liquid, to give NaCl, which is what? An aqueous solution, plus what? H2O, still what there? Still a liquid. So observe in this case now, I'm showing the state of matter for each compound here. This is a compound, right? Not an element. This is an element here, an element to form compound, right? So now observe that in this case here, each compound have their state of matter. So when it comes to chemical equation, I can still represent them by their state of matter. Why is this so? To tell us the kind of formula we're actually dealing with. So the state of matter tells you what you are dealing with. That's the concept, please. So when it comes to chemical equation, we can represent via what there, via subscript, right? Using the state of via subscript by showing the state of matter. So as I have here, now let me explain something, please. If I have H2O liquid, if I still have H2O solid, H2O gas this way, this is still H2O as we know, but their state of matter now differs. What kind of H2O are we dealing with here? That's the tax. This H2O liquid is what? A normal water. This is normal water. So in this case here, we are dealing with just normal water. But look at the second one there. H2S. H is solid. Is this water? No, ice block. So the state of matter tells you what you are dealing with. This is an ice block. This is an ice block now. This H2G, this gas, is not water, it's a steam. Gas, steam. So this man here is a steam. So not that their state of matter tells you what kind of thing you are handling with. That's the tax, please. That's the tax behind state of matter via subscript, please. So I understand all this whole concept. Let's look at I understand the state of matter of elements of compound or element there. Let's look at something very important called how to balance a chemical equation. Let's look at the concept of balancing of chemical equation. The reason why I treated this topic, chemical equation, is to discuss or to teach you guys how to correctly balance a chemical equation. Now, if I may ask you, what is the definition behind balancing of chemical equation? You can't tell me that this is your first time hearing this concept. You have heard it before. So can you please define it for me? What do you think is the definition for balance of chemical equation? Take a little bit. So what do you think it would be the definition for balancing of chemical equation? All right, let me get the definition, please. To balance a chemical equation means to ensure the number of mole of elements on the reactant side is equal to the number of mole of elements on the product side. That's all. So I'm ensuring that number of mole of number of mole of elements in the reactant side here is equal to number of mole of elements on the product side. Sodium is 1 here. Chlorine is 1, chlorine is still 1 here, balanced, right? Sodium, Na is 1, Na is just 1. Oh, oxygen is 1, oxygen is 1 here. Hydrogen is 1, that's 2 hydrogen here. Chlorine is 1, is balanced. So I'm going to ensure that number of mole of elements on the right hand side is equal to the product side too. That's the concept behind balancing of chemical equation. All right, at this point now, when it comes to balancing chemical equation, two things to note. Number one, please. Note number one, two things to note while balancing chemical equation. Number one, please. Equations are balanced by adding whole number coefficient before any element or compound. The first thing to note when it comes to balancing chemical equation is what? Number one, I said equations are balanced by adding whole number coefficient before any element or compound. Number one thing to note. Number two, please. Number two is that while balancing chemical equation, subscripts are not used. Subscripts are not used, just whole number coefficient. These two things are going to be considered when we start balancing chemical equation. Let's take a few examples on how to balance a chemical equation, and we're going to apply the two conditions for balancing a chemical equation. All right, let's start with balancing chemical equation, please. Example 1 says, the example says, balance the following equation. Number 1, balance the following equation: Mg plus HCl to give Mg Cl2 plus H2. Number 1. Number 2, I have HCl. This is aqueous plus Ca CO3. This is of course solid, to give Ca Cl2. This of course aqueous plus H2O plus H2O. This gas, right? Okay, H2O here is liquid plus CO3, perhaps CO2 gas. So observe the second example here. They represent each compound via compound via what? Subscript. This is aqueous, this solid, this aqueous, liquid here. Is it water here? Look at this water or gas or ice block or steam. What is this? Water, liquid water. So it tells you what you are dealing with. Subscript tells you what you are dealing with, please. So number 3 example. Number 3, I have H2 gas plus oxygen 2, of course gas, to give H2O, still gas. All right, of course, this H2O here is a steam, right? Gas is a steam, not water, not ice block, a steam. All right, how do you possibly balance this equation? Let's get this done, please. Let's balance this equation. Number 1 there, solution. Number 1 there, I have Mg combined with HCl, right? This HCl is either hydrochloric acid or hydrochloric acid, right? So this HCl here is hydrochloric acid. So is it's 2 ways. Either you call it hydrochloric acid or hydrochloric gas. So in this case here, to be an acid here. So I have Mg HCl combined to give MgCl2 plus H2. Please question, it is balanced. We said for any equation to be balanced, what's your first note? I say you should note that for an equation to be balanced, we add what? Just whole number coefficient. Subscripts are not used. Just what? Whole number coefficient. Please help me check. Magnesium, of course, look up. Oh, magnesium is 1 here, right? Magnesium is 1 here, no problem, balanced. Hydrogen is 1 here. Hydrogen is 2 here. Now, don't tell me that since hydrogen is 2 here, you now come and put 2 here. That's 2 hydrogen. It's wrong. We said subscript are not used. Any number down this way is called subscript. Subscript. We don't use subscript. What do we use? A whole number coefficient, please. So in this case now, this is wrong in this case here. So that 2 should be what? A coefficient. So that 2 will come in this form. That will be 2 here. So it means that, look up now, it means that I'll have magnesium is 1. Magnesium is 1, no problem. Hydrogen is now, hydrogen, there's a 1 here now. 1 times 2 is 2 hydrogen now. 2 hydrogen, balance. Chlorine is 2 here. There's an invisible 1 here. 1 times 2 is 2 chlorine. So these 2 will affect hydrogen and chlorine at the same time. So it means that chlorine now is 2 here, balance. Hydrogen is 2 balance. Magnesium is 1 balance. So equation 1 has been balanced. So the chemical equation at number 1 is said to be balanced. So I have it here. Let's do number 2. For number 2 there, I have HCl combined with Ca, CO3 to give Ca, Cl2 plus H2O plus CO2. I ignored this state of matter, right, due to space sake, right? So let's solve this, please. Now let's balance this equation. We said to balance equation, but we're not dealing with subscript, just what? O number coefficient. Just add O number to it. That's all. Hydrogen is 1 here. Hydrogen is what? 2 here. So now the task is that hydrogen is 1, here is 2. So I cannot come here and put 2 here. It will be wrong. It will be what? A coefficient. Now in this case, this is number 2. So I'll put 2 here. This becomes a 2 hydrogen balanced. Chlorine is now 2 because this coefficient here will affect both chlorine and hydrogen. So there's an invisible 1. 1 times 2 becomes 2 chlorine. I have 2 chlorine. So hydrogen and chlorine now is balanced. Calcium is 1. Calcium is 1 here, balanced. So carbon is 1 here. Carbon is 1 here, balanced. Oxygen is 3. This 1 oxygen and this 2 combined together will give 3 oxygen. So observe that the number of mole of elements on the right hand side now is now equal to number of mole of elements on the product side. This is balanced. This is balanced, please. It becomes a balanced equation. Let's number 3. Number 3 there, I have H2 combined with O2 to give H2O, right? Let's balance this, please. This is H2. Hydrogen is 2 here. Hydrogen is 2 here, balanced, no problem. Oxygen is 2 here. Oxygen is 1 here, please. Oxygen is 1 here. So this is 2, this is 1. How do you balance this? We need a 2. Don't go and put 2 here, it's wrong. Put the 2 as a coefficient. So it becomes 1 is 1 times 2 is now 2 oxygen. 2 oxygen. But mind you, it has distorted hydrogen. Initially, hydrogen was 2, but this one now, this 2 will affect both hydrogen and oxygen at the same time. So this one, in this case, it becomes 4 hydrogen here and 2 oxygen. This becomes 2 hydrogen. So I'll put a 2 here, becomes a 4 hydrogen, 2 oxygen, 4 hydrogen, 2 oxygen. This is now a balanced equation, as you can see in front of you. So that's to balance this chemical equation. Next class, look at several past questions on JAMB and WAEC that comes out on how to balance chemical equation, right? So see you in the next class. Try to watch our next class. It will help you to further increase the solid knowledge of how to balance chemical equation. Do well to share this video to your friends and classmates so they can learn too.